Welcome back to another English lesson. In today's lesson, we are going to be talking about the state of New York, and it's going to have a little bit of everything to improve your English. I will be reading, the words will be on the screen. You'll be able to listen. That's one of the best ways to improve your English. And by the end of this, I don't see how your English isn't going to be better than it was when we started. And a little bonus, you're going to learn about American history. It's always important to know a little bit about the culture when you're studying a foreign language. And we'll learn some new phrasal verbs and some new vocabulary along the way. Let's get right into this lesson. And I'm reading from the Wikipedia page about New York State, but if you notice, it is simple English. So a little bit easier than the regular Wikipedia page. New York, officially the state of New York, is a state of the United States and was one of the original 13 colonies, which were the first 13 states to make up the United States, or they say the US here. But look at make up. There's an English phrasal verb there, and it just means there are different parts coming together to make one thing. So those first 13 colonies made up the United States. New York is in the northeastern United States, bordered by Lake Ontario and Canada on the north, Lake Erie and Canada on the west, Pennsylvania on the west and south, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut on the east, and New Jersey on the south, in the eastern part of the state. So right there, we have a lot of U.S. states to choose from there. Before we read that next paragraph, let's take a look at where they are talking about. New York State is in the red. You can see that state right there is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont. Side note, in case anybody cares, I was actually born in the state of Vermont, but nobody cares. Let's get back to the second paragraph here. New York was originally New Netherland, started by the Dutch Empire in the early 17th century. Did you know that? We don't think of the Dutch or the Netherlands as a colonial power like France or Spain or Portugal or England. But yeah, originally where New York is today, that was colonized at first by the Dutch. Late in the century, it surrendered to an English fleet during the Anglo-Dutch Wars. A lot of times when you see Anglo in English, think of England, Anglo, or think of the language English, and became part of the British Empire. Here, I have some shadowing practice for you. I am going to read this sentence, and then you can shadow after me. You can pause the lesson and repeat after me. It will help you with your pronunciation. And the reason I wrote this sentence is because it has a phrasal verb in it. Oh, everybody hates learning phrasal verbs, right? They're so difficult. But this one is gave up or surrendered. The Dutch surrendered or gave up the piece of land that is now known as New York City to the British. They also mentioned a word that might be new for you, and that is fleet. And right down there, you can see I have a definition for fleet. A fleet is a group of ships, vehicles, or aircraft. An example sentence for you is right at the bottom. And a moving company is a business that helps people move from one house to the other. They will pack up, another English phrasal verb. They will pack up all of their furniture, all of their belongings, and help them move from one house to the other. The moving company had a fleet of 13 trucks. And here's one more example sentence. New York City is often called the Big Apple, NYC, or simply the city. And did you notice when I said often, I read it like often? A lot of times that T will change to a D just because it's easier to say. And while we're here, I want to introduce a new term to you, and that is thumbnail sketch. In today's lesson, we're only doing a thumbnail sketch of the state of New York. Not easy to say, thumbnail sketch. But if you look down at the bottom and you've never heard of what a thumbnail sketch is, well, look, there's a definition for you. A thumbnail sketch is what we call a quick view. It doesn't dig too deep into the subject. The first way I read that is how you will hear a lot of Americans speak. But below is actually the grammatically correct way because deeply is used as an adverb there. And often with adverbs, we will put an ly at the end. And if you remember adverbs, they help describe other adverbs, adjectives, and verbs. A thumbnail sketch is what we call a quick view. It doesn't dig too deeply into the subject. Two ways to say that sentence, one a little bit more formal than the other. All right, back to the article, and we are, hopefully you can see my cursor. We're starting second paragraph. What is it? Third sentence, maybe? It starts with about. About half the Dutch colony was given to neighboring English colonies. The Battle of Long Island, Battle of Saratoga, maybe a difficult word there for you, and other important battles of the American Revolution were fought in New York, and it joined the United States. The slave trade brought many black people into the state where they were forced to work for white colonies. Yeah, slavery, it's a touchy subject. When there is something that's difficult to talk about, you may call it a touchy subject. Yeah, slavery is a touchy subject. It's an embarrassing part of American history, but it happened, and it's best not to forget that. We have a saying in English when it comes to history. It's good to remember history so you don't repeat it. I think that's what almost every American history teacher says on the first day of class. They might say something like this: if you don't remember history, you are doomed to repeat it. Doomed is a verb often used in that phrase. Yeah, and a lot of times we think of the American South. When I say the American South, I mean states like Texas, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, the American South. We often think of slavery only happening in the American South, but that's not true. It just disappeared earlier in the American North. But let's talk about present day New York. What's going on in New York right now? So, third to the last paragraph. This is the last paragraph. This is the second to last paragraph. So, this would be the third to last paragraph. The United States Census Bureau says that as of 2005, New York had the fourth most people or population in the United States after California, Texas, and Florida. New York's estimated population is 19,297,729. Let's take a look at that word estimated. Estimated. So we don't have an exact number. We don't have a precise number. An estimate is another way to say a really good guess. So New York's estimated population is, let's practice reading big numbers, 19,297,729. Notice the commas in that number. Those are big keys of where you want to stop, pause, and think about the placeholding number. 19,297,729. Now let's talk about some of the cities of New York City. And it's hard not to talk about the biggest one. I think even in the United States, when you say New York, most people think of the city first and not the state. The biggest city in New York is also called New York, located in the southeastern part of the state and built on the Hudson River. It is by far the biggest city in the US. By far, that's a good term to know if you want to say something is a lot more than another thing. So he is by far the fastest runner in his state. It's not close, by far, really fast. Part of New York City is on Long Island, a large island in the Atlantic Ocean, and another part of it is on Staten Island, which is to the southwest of Manhattan, the central business district. So you may have heard of Manhattan. Whenever I think of Manhattan, I think, wow, rich people. Most people living in New York State live in the New York metropolitan area, one of the world's biggest metropolitan areas, which also includes parts of eastern New Jersey. Yeah, so maybe a tough sentence right there, but metropolitan, it means it's bigger than just the city because maybe some of the people living in the metropolitan area also work in the city. So here's an example sentence for you. The metropolitan area or metro area of New York City also includes parts of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. And I know that article didn't say that, but it's true. There are a couple other counties and a couple other states that are included in the New York metropolitan area. The larger part of New York, north and northwest of the metropolitan area, is called upstate New York. Upstate New York, that's basically the two ways you'll hear New York State talked about. It's New York City or upstate New York. Pretty much everything that isn't part of New York City is upstate New York. Cities in this part of New York include Buffalo. Buffalo has a football team called the Buffalo Bills, and they have a hockey team called the Buffalo Sabres, the state's second largest city. All right, you see that city that I highlighted? Don't even try to sound it out. Don't even try to read it because it sounds nothing like it looks. That is Rochester. Rochester. Syracuse, and the state capital of Albany. These places became cities because of the Erie Canal. Between 1788 and 1797, the legislature, we'll talk about that in a minute, the legislature moved the state capital around between Albany, Kingston, and, how do you think you say that word? Starting with the P. It's Poughkeepsie. Poughkeepsie. And New York City. Albany became the permanent capital from 1797. Permanent, that means it's going to stay. It's not going anywhere. It is what it is. Permanent. Maybe you get a permanent stain on your shirt. That is not coming out. Maybe you were eating a hot dog, some mustard dripped on your shirt, it dried. Yeah, that's a permanent stain. You are not getting out that stain. Now let's take a look at that word legislature. Legislature is often another name for a state government. Legislature. Come on, isn't your English better now than it was just a few minutes ago? Hey, if you like learning this way, take a look at a lesson I did just like this one on the state of Florida. Thanks for watching.